Please join me in welcoming to the stage the wonderfully talented Debra Messing.
Hello. Hi.
I wanted to start by asking about the character, because we've followed and loved her for so many years, and how Grace now compares to the original idea you had when you first got cast and you were putting together what her backstory was going to be, and how much you've had to pivot and change that over the years for storyline.
Oh, gosh. I was 29 when we did the pilot, and the Grace that we met in the first round, she was looking for love, and she was neurotic, and she was, trying to make her way professionally. And there was, I think, a lot of uncertainty and fear. Then 12 years later, coming back, which is still crazy, and I don't understand how it happened, but now I'm an adult, and Grace is an adult. And what I love about this iteration of her is that she's very at peace with the choices she's made. She's divorced and single and happy, and she's, built a really wonderful business on her own, and the friends that she's chosen are her chosen family. And I think that there is a peace around her that I'm grateful that she has found.
Yeah. When you were bringing her back, did you sit there and think about, okay, this is an aspect of her that I think would actually remain the same and I want to keep, and this is something that it's time to throw away?
Yeah, it was very daunting to come back after 12 years. Megan and Eric, they were like, oh, easy, no problem. And I think Sean and I were both a little bit more nervous about it. My thinking was, okay, I have to pick certain things that are identifiable from the Grace that everyone already knows. So they say, oh, my friend's back. So, little, physical tics or, intonations or way of relating with each one of the characters. And then it was like, okay, now how has she matured? And that was a much more difficult thing to figure out. I think it was probably the second or third episode in the first season back when Megan and I were trapped in the 18-foot shower. I think that was when I felt like, oh, okay, she's back. I've found her. Putting us in that space and having to deal with it and being all contorted, we were able to, find funny physical things to do. And I think that was when I felt like I could exhale, and it's like, okay, she's back.
You're mentioning the physicality of that scene, and there's so much great physical comedy. What's been one of the most challenging scenes for you to shoot in that realm?
Oh, well, the exploding water bra, for sure. I mean, it's my favorite episode for obvious reasons, but it was crazy hard. They had a boob man. A boob man who came with, two little tubes, and they were connected up my back and into my bra and through the shirt. And, and the set is 50 degrees, because cold is funny. And, oh, you didn't know that? Oh, yeah. I learned that when I went on David Letterman for the first time. I thought I was gonna die. Like, I could not, my teeth were chattering, and they're like, oh, no. It keeps people awake, and they're much more quickly able to laugh. But we got to that part, and all of a sudden I turn, and nothing comes out, and all of a sudden I feel doused with water going all the way down my back, down my pants, all the way into my shoes. So it didn't work. And I was completely swamped, and they're like, all right, we have to change her. So they changed me again, hooked me up again, Didn't happen a second time. And at that point, I had begun getting bronchitis at that point. And then the third time, finally, it worked. And it was so exciting when it finally worked, because it's like, that's what we're all working for. And then I was out of work for 2 weeks because I had such a bad case of bronchitis. Yeah.
And you've been playing this character for, I looked it up, 228 episodes, which is astounding.
Whoa!
How do you keep it fresh and challenging and exciting for yourself as an actor and a performer?
Oh, I think the credit really goes to the writing staff. The fact that built into the DNA of Will and Grace from the very beginning, the show addressed what was happening in real time. So in politics, in pop culture, and so that alone gives us fresh material to work with. Besides that, again, it's trying to mine the funny of approaching middle age. And so there are things that we have not done yet that I want to do, that we can do now because I'm old enough,
And how much access do you have to the writers when they're putting together a script? Are they ever coming to you and saying, we're thinking about this for Grace, what do you think? And then also on set when you're shooting?
Max will say, oh my God, I have this idea for something. And, it's always brilliant. And I'll be like, oh, that's awesome. But then, I might have an idea. And so we're able to pitch a storyline to them. And sometimes they use it and sometimes they don't. When we are actually working, the 4 days of rehearsal, every single day it's a completely different script. And so it is definitely a dialogue. We get the new script in the morning, we put it on its feet, we run through it for all of the writers, and then, we discuss what worked, what didn't work. And we might say, we feel like this scene can go just a little farther. And, now it's a shorter conversation because we've been working together for so long and there's such deep trust. So now we might be like, and the writer's like, yeah, we see it. And then they go and they rewrite, and then we come in the next day and there's a brand new thing, and these things work, and now these things don't work. And so it's a constant conversation. Yeah.
And you're one of the few sitcoms that shoots still with a live audience,
yes.
which is amazing.
Yes.
And then when you're in the room and you have that live feedback, are you ever in the moment making a shift and changing a scene? And if so, is there a specific scene that you remember that really became something different because of that feedback?
Oh, everything changes in front of the audience. What I love about doing Will and Grace is that it is very old school. We have 200 people there on show night, and it really does feel, it's the closest thing to a theater experience that you're going to find on camera. And so just like in the theater, there's a dialogue, and you don't know what's going to land until the audience tells you if it's funny or not. And so, we'll do a pass, and anything that didn't land, then 11 writers will scurry in together, and they'll be blah, 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 and then they'll come running up and they'll be like, okay, cut this, cut this, cut this. This is your new line, go. And immediately. So 15%, 20% of what you see on the show, it's the first time those words are coming out of our mouth because we've never rehearsed it. And then they'll say, okay, cut that line. Now we have another one. Okay, this is your new line, go. And yeah, it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, but I think the more you do it, it's sort of a muscle that grows. And I've been told that no other show does it because they say, well, the actors are like, no. And I think maybe we were too young to know that we could say no. I think they were just like, well, let's just see if they're going to do it or not. Yeah. We'll be like, and they're like, oh, they did it. Okay, we're just going to keep throwing stuff at them. And yeah.
Speaking of saying no, what was the first point in your career where you felt like you really could begin saying no to things, whether it was a particular scene or a job that you just didn't feel was right in your gut?
I started saying no right from the very beginning. I had absolutely no right to say no. I was unemployed. I had no money. I was fresh out of graduate school. I went to NYU. And I went off and I did The Importance of Being Earnest in Seattle, and I loved it. And I had made the plan for myself that my career was going to be that I was going to do the great plays in all of the best regional theaters around the country. That was my goal. And then I went to Seattle, and I realized that I was not a gypsy. I was so sad living out of a suitcase. I loved the show. I loved the people, but I just could not. I was homesick. So I came back, and I told my agents, okay, change of plans. I'm only going to take a job that's in New York. And they said, well, 90%, 95% of all jobs are outside of New York. And I said, yes, I know. And I said, and I'll cater. I'll wait. And they were kind of looking at me sideways. And then I got an off-Broadway show and another off-Broadway show. And then I went to L.A. And there was a play that was happening here by Donald Margulies, Collected Stories. And I was offered a pilot for NBC directed by James Burrows, and that was my goal. But they would conflict. And I flew myself here because I was like, I have to audition for this play. And I got the play. And I said, okay, I'm going to turn down the TV show. I'm going to do the play. And I have no regrets.
Kind of going back to the show a little bit, I think one of the things obviously everyone's always loved is how groundbreaking it is in representing the LGBTQ community. And when the show first started, there was very little representation of that. But in the interim, while you were off the air, obviously it opened the door to so many other shows. Have you since then been looking to other shows and going, okay, how are they representing the community? How do we want to make sure that we're doing the same and being more inclusive of all the different, and the fact that the conversation around the community has moved forward so much in the last 10, 15, 20 years as well.
I mean, it's so exciting, and it's worth celebrating every day how far we've come. I mean, we've got further to go. More representation is needed for sure. When we came back, I said to the writers, when we were on the first time, we covered LGB. And I said, now that we're coming back, I want to finish the alphabet. And, so we had a trans actor on, and, we can certainly do more. But I think that we are living in the world of will and grace. And it's definitely inspiring to look around and to see so many stories that are being told in different ways about the LGBTQ community. And I'm just hopeful that all the writers out there will continue to expound and continue.
In some ways, does it feel like there's less pressure on the show for all of you because there's that wider representation, whereas when the show began, everyone was saying, Will and Jack, that is what a gay man is.
Yes. I think there's less pressure on us across the board because we were only supposed to do 10 episodes, and now we're starting our third season. And I think that because we chose to come back, because we wanted to come back, and we wanted to make people laugh, that was where it came from. It was right after the election, and we thought, wow, we need to laugh. There must be people out there who need to laugh, and let's just do this. We're not worried about ratings. We're not worried about, any of those things that you worry about, in order to keep your job. I think that we know that this is a grace period, no pun intended. And we're just enjoying every day of it. And yes, the practice, what's the name of it? There's a woman there who, during the first run, we would be doing the show and she would come up and she would be like, you can't say that. because we would say naughty things. And we tried to get away with implying a lot of very sexy, funny things. And that was part of the fun, was trying to get past, the censors. And I don't even know what the censor looks like this year. Yeah.
I love it. That's how it should be. Yeah. And because you mentioned coming back right after the election, did David and Max talk to you guys at any point and say, we're going to go for Trump. We're not afraid to express these opinions. But then on the same side, we see Karen's character. So we do see the other side of it all as well.
I mean, that was one of my prerequisites in order to come back. I said, if we're going to come back, we have to come back and do our show. And, as you said, our show always was provocative, and it always pushed the boundaries, and it always made statements about, political statements, social statements. And the writing of the show is just, it's part of its brilliance is that, you do have liberals and you do have Karen, who is, the conservative. And so you really do get, all sides. I mean, it's all in jest, obviously, and a lot of it is kind of satirical, mocking. But I think that we all expected to have, politics as part of the storytelling.
Yeah. One of the things that is really admirable about the career that you've crafted for yourself is your voice as an activist as well. Would you say that playing Grace and being in this show really helped you to find your voice in that realm, or is it really just that it gave you the platform for things that you were already pushing towards?
I think both. Mm-hmm. When I had my acting teacher died of AIDS, and it was a really traumatizing loss, and I, was sort of quietly giving money to different organizations to support research and treatment and education, and then I got Grace, and all of a sudden we had this platform, and we realized as the show went on that the show was much more than just entertainment, that it was something that was really important for a community that had never been represented wholly on television before, and it came easily to defend our show and defend our characters, and to, I think we all felt and feel a responsibility to use our platform responsibly and to try and enact change that is inclusive. Yeah.
I think that's a great jumping off point to talk about the episode that we just watched, Grace's Secret, in which you reveal to your father that you were sexually assaulted by his best friend as a teenager. What point did you know that this storyline was going to be in the season? Because it comes very early on in the season as well.
Yeah, I think I knew about 2 weeks before we started rehearsal, and I was in the group of women who started Time's Up, and so when I heard that they were writing this episode, I was so grateful. And again, it was what's happening right now in real time. So again, because it's Will and Grace, it made sense. But it also felt important, again, to take this opportunity. I found out after the fact that it's actually the story of one of the writers. It actually happened to her. This is her story. And so that I found out right before we were filming that it was her story. And so that sort of I felt a greater sense of responsibility to tell her story in a way that was authentic. I think the thing that was obviously tricky was we're doing a sitcom. So to find the ways in which to have little moments of comic release, with all the tension. But the B story was so outrageous, and that's how they balanced it out, because our storyline was so serious.
But even within the scene with you and your father, you have the comic relief of the waitress coming over, like when she comes over to say the shrimp salad is gone.
That's right.
And how did you navigate that? Because it's a very unique thing to have to go that dark and then still bounce to comedy in the same scene.
It's challenging. It's challenging, and I was really excited by the challenge. And the writing barely changed for that big scene. So it was unusual that I was able to have 3 solid days to actually work on the scene. And then, we have Jim Burrows, who is legendary director. And so I always know that he has, I have his eye, and he's going to protect me, and he's going to protect the show. So if I'm off or if I'm missing something, I know that he'll be right there to get me on track.
And how much did you all talk in depth about the specifics of that monologue? Because it unpacks, I feel like I was rewatching this episode and I actually rewound that scene several times because it unpacks every single aspect of sexual assaults, like the sexualization of teenagers, the fact that she feared not being believed, that she dropped clues that he was creepy. She remembers exactly what she was wearing. You remember all the specific details when these things happen.
Yeah.
So how much did you break it down line by line with your scene partner?
I didn't break it down with him. He did not want to talk about it with me because his experience was so different. And again, that was also a very unusual thing to happen because we're all so collaborative and we all tell each other what to do, and it's all dysfunctional and fun. But he was like, I don't want to know, and just that monologue was the only thing that changed a little bit. Where it at first the way it was written, it didn't build to when I stand up. It didn't go that high, and I just felt rhythmically that it wanted to go further, and they did it, and it was just like that. It came together, but it was painful to imagine, this writer who I adore, and to imagine her in that situation. And the thing that was the most astonishing was just the amount of tweets that I got and Instagram DMs from people who had been sexually assaulted, and how grateful they were that we did the story, that they were able to see themselves, reflected and represented, and the number of people that said, that is my exact story. That blew my mind. So I knew after the fact that it resonated in a very powerful way, and that made me feel very grateful.
Yeah. And one of the most powerful things about all of us sharing these stories, especially in such a public platform for this episode, is that it does open up that opportunity for other people to do the same.
Yes.
Has anyone come up to you and been like, I actually had a conversation with my dad, or I talked to this person and finally told them about something that happened to me?
Yes, absolutely. I had people say because of the show, because I saw it, I had the courage to finally, but then I also had messages that were this was my exact story, and I wish my dad was alive so I could have this closure. I never was able to tell him what happened. Yeah.
And I was watching an interview recently where you were actually talking about your own experience being sexually harassed by the director on A Walk in the Clouds, and how this whole movement helped to make you realize that behavior was not okay, because it is something that has been excused for so many years.
Yeah.
And I really admire the fact that you called him out by name as well, and you said it was this director on this film. There's no question about who it was. Did you debate whether you wanted to be that specific about it in public?
Well, I was there's something called the Makers Conference, and it's once a year, and it's a couple of days in California, and it's a conference about and for women, and it's empowering. It's women from every industry, and I was asked, along with 2 other actresses, to write a story, a monologue, of a time when we felt that we were not being respected. And so this was my story that I did, and I did it in front of 100 people. I didn't realize that it was going to be videotaped, and then it was put out, and then all of a sudden it became a story, and and the director denied it, and of course he did. But I have 20 people who I shared the story with, immediately after it happened, who can it's fine. But the point is that I didn't intend to be brave and to, take a stand and to out this person. It was, going into a space where women were being vulnerable and just sharing. But I'm glad I did. But you're right, I did not realize until Time's Up and Me Too that I had been sexually harassed. Like I just didn't label it. I just was like, oh, that's Hollywood. That's that's gross. That's the gross part of Hollywood. But it was like, oh no, now I know for sure that if that happened today, he would be fired, and there would be repercussions.
And obviously, I mean, you're at a point in your career where you have the ability to turn around and say to someone in a powerful position, this isn't okay, or to rat someone out, essentially. But is there any advice that you would give to actors who are starting out in their careers a little bit more as to how to push back on it without feeling like they're killing the chances of their career? Because I think that's always one of the difficult reasons that people don't say anything.
I think it's important to find your union rep as soon as you get on set, and you shake their hand and you say, hi, I want you to keep your eyes on me. And believe that they are an advocate, and that if anything happens, all you have to do is go to them and they will be your advocate. Back then, I didn't know. I was young, I was in California, I'd never been, I was away from everyone that I knew. I also think that you, as a woman, as a young woman, you want to reach out to the other women on the set. There is a sisterhood, an unspoken sisterhood, I think, because of the disparity of power. And I think if you create those relationships, the people who are more senior, who have a lot more experience, will keep an eye.
And even just the thing of saying to someone, this person's kind of creepy, and them saying, oh, I've had the same experience as well, is powerful in itself.
Yes.
I wanted to switch to some of the questions that we had from some of the audience, and I wanted to start with this one. What has been the most rewarding experience working with the show and with the cast over the years for you?
Oh, definitely it would be the social political impact that the show has had on our culture. It was something that we never anticipated, but once we realized that it held great meaning for people, we were able to lean into that and to be activists. And I think when Joe Biden, as vice president, said on Meet the Press that nothing has done more to forward the rights for the LGBTQ community than Will and Grace, that I fell off of my couch when he said that. And besides the birth of my son, I think that was my proudest moment.
Is there any particular story from an audience member coming up to you and telling their own story about how the show made them either find family members being more open to them, or a family member saying, I was able to approve of my son's sexuality, for example? Constantly.
And that's what's so beautiful. When we started, people were still writing letters. So this was a long time ago. So we got fan mail in our second season, and it was astonishing. It was not, oh, I love your show. I got a letter saying, I'm 15 and I came out and my best friend won't speak to me and my mother won't stop crying. I wish I had a Grace in my life. Or another person who said, I came out and, my family, won't speak to me, but I've been watching Will and Grace, and it's made me feel seen and known, and it's given me strength, And then someone else said, I've been watching it with my mother, and slowly, week by week, we've actually gotten to a point where we're laughing together at the same things. And so yes.
This one's from Cynthia, who is basically asking for a story about an audition that was going bad, but that you feel like you managed to turn around, if you have one.
I've had many. But I think I want to tell a little story that I think is sort of a parallel to that. I was out in LA for the first time with my first TV show guest starring on NYPD Blue. And it was supposed to be one episode, and they said, oh, we like it so much, we're going to write 2 more episodes, so just hang out for another week. And I had just signed with my agent, and nobody in LA knew me at the agency in LA. And so I said, will you send me out for a general? And I went to a general for Fox. And they said, what would you like to do? And I said, oh, well, I like Friends, and I like Mad About You. And they said, great, well, if we have a script that you think you're right for, let us know. And I said, well, you do. And they said, what? Well, which one? And I said, it's called Ned and Stacy. And they said, oh, we should get you in. I said, oh, no, I've already auditioned. And they said, what happened? I said, I never heard from them again. And I said, but I'm right for it. And they said, oh, all right, we're going to get you in again. We're going to have you go in. And that was in LA. And so I walk in the door, and Michael Whitehorn, the creator of the show, before I could say anything, he said, okay, all right, look, I love you. I think you're great. You're wrong for the part. And I said, okay, can you tell me why? And he said, you were just like a Midwestern, pure girl. He said, I'm looking for a neurotic Jew from New York. And I'm like, hello. And I said, look, let's make a deal. You let me make an adjustment. And if it's no bueno, God bless, you will never hear from me again. No one will call you and make you see me again. Just will you give me a chance just to make an adjustment? He said, go ahead. And luckily, the casting director had seen me in an off-Broadway play that I had done, 4 Dogs and a Bone. I was the understudy, and I had gone on. And she saw me. And she said, oh, I saw her. She can do this part. And she said, yeah, let her do it. And so I made the adjustment, and I got the part. And so I think, the most important thing is to be your best advocate. When you walk into a room, it's so nerve-wracking. And I don't know about you guys, but I always felt like I wanted to shrink. Like I was scared to take up space in their room, and I was sort of like apologetic about it. Like, hey, okay, I'm going to try and be as good as I can. And, and I think that what I've learned is that 5 minutes that you get, that's your time. That's your time. And you could do whatever you want with it. So if you start and you know that you're like thinking about the ham sandwich that you had at lunch and you are not in the scene, you can say, I'm sorry, can I start over again? I'm going to start over again. And because you can, and you should. Because you just, it's a chance. I love to audition because it's an opportunity to explore another character, whether or not I get the job or not. I just like the process. And I think that that's really important, is just to to make it work for you, not for them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of experience in this episode today.